I'm Claire Evans, 26 years old, and for most of my life, I was my family's invisible backbone. I paid the bills, cooked the meals, and held our crumbling little townhouse together in a quiet suburb of Milwaukee. My mom left when I was 14, my dad stopped working soon after, and my younger sister Lee became the golden child. Everyone told me family comes first, but they never said family could feel like a cage. One Tuesday night, over a plate of reheated spaghetti, my dad finally said the words that broke something in me. 70% of your paycheck goes to Leah's tuition, 30 to me. That's fair, he said, like he was announcing a weather report. The kitchen smelled like dust and sauce. A single bulb flickered above us, and the leaky faucet dripped like a slow metronome. Dad leaned back in his chair, belly stretching his faded sweatshirt like a king collecting tribute. Lee was upstairs, probably scrolling for her next designer bag, for school. I stared at my father, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel guilt, just clarity. I laughed. It was sharp and sudden, even to my own ears. What's funny? He snapped. Nothing, I said. Just realizing that I've given you everything, my time, my money, my silence. And now you think you can divide me up like I'm a grocery list. He slammed his palm on the table. We're family. Lee needs her chance at life, and I keep this roof over your head. You should be grateful. I stood, the chair legs scraping the cracked tile. No, Dad. You've had more than enough of me. I went to my room and pulled a suitcase from under my bed. I didn't pack it yet. I just let it sit by the door like a warning. To him and to myself. That night, lying in the dark, I realized the truth. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life being their silent wallet. I wasn't going to live like a ghost anymore. The night after that argument, I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling of my bedroom. My suitcase sat by the door, half in shadow, like it was daring me to make a move. For the first time in years, I wasn't replaying the day in guilt. I was replaying my life, like a stranger watching someone else's misery. I thought about every morning. I woke up early to cook Lee's breakfast before work. Every paycheck I handed to my dad without question. Every time I swallowed my voice to keep the peace. The truth hit me like a slow tide. I wasn't living. I was maintaining. The next day, I went to work with a new kind of focus. I was a customer support coordinator at a mid-sized logistics firm. Nothing glamorous, but it was steady. My boss liked me because I never said no to extra shifts, and that day I asked for overtime with a calm determination I'd never felt before. I started saving quietly. A separate account at a bank my dad wouldn't think to check. Every week, I transferred a little more, and with each deposit, I felt a piece of myself returning. At home, nothing changed, at least on the surface. My dad still grunted from his recliner. Leah still shouted down the hall for emergency money. And I still handed over the same envelope of cash every Friday. But inside, something was different. I stopped listening to the guilt in their voices. I stopped believing that love meant giving until I had nothing left. Late at night, I'd sit by my window with the lights off, watching the street lamps paint the empty road in soft gold. I'd whisper to myself, this won't be forever. I'm allowed to want more. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. I used to think family meant sacrifice without question. But family without respect is just a chain you wear because someone told you it's love. Learning to say no wasn't cruelty, it was survival. I realized that freedom doesn't always arrive with a dramatic escape. Sometimes, it begins as a quiet decision in the dark. And when you finally choose yourself, that silence feels like peace, not loneliness. Weeks passed, and my quiet plan grew roots. I went to work, saved in secret, and smiled politely while my father and sister treated me like an endless ATM. Then one Thursday evening, everything cracked open. I came home from a long shift and noticed my bedroom door slightly ajar. A single envelope lay on the floor. My pay stub. My stomach dropped. I had left it out on my desk that morning. Lee stood in the hallway, arms crossed, holding another copy I'd printed. Her face was flushed with something between anger and betrayal. "This is what they pay you," she hissed. I froze, and before I could speak, she shouted down the hall, "Dad! You need to see this?" Heavy footsteps. My father appeared, his T-shirt stained with spaghetti sauce. He snatched the paper from her hand, scanned the numbers, and his eyes hardened. "You've been hiding money from your family." His voice was low and dangerous. I didn't answer. I just stood there, gripping the doorframe. "You've been sitting on cash while we're scraping by," he barked. "From now on, 70% goes to Leah, 30% to me. That's it. Non-negotiable." The room spun for a second, but not from fear clarity. I saw it all for what it was: years of my life funneled into their comfort, their laziness, their entitlement. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply turned, walked into my room, and pulled the suitcase all the way out. This time I packed. But here's the twist I didn't expect. When I unzipped my suitcase, there was a folded piece of paper I didn't recognize. My old journal page. On it, in shaky handwriting, was a message I had written to myself years ago at 17. "One day, you will leave. And when you do, you won't owe anyone an explanation." It felt like the girl I used to be was giving me permission. By midnight, the house was silent. Lee was in her room, slamming drawers, calling me selfish under her breath. Dad was snoring on the recliner, beer can tipping in his hand. I placed the house keys on the kitchen counter. No note, no goodbye. But as I turned the knob, something stopped me. A low voice from the living room. "You'll regret this, Claire. Family is all you've got." I glanced back. Dad was awake, eyes glinting in the flicker of the TV. "No," I said softly. "I have myself now, and that's finally enough." I walked out. The air outside was cool and tasted like freedom. I drove to the tiny studio apartment I'd been paying for in secret, above a closed bakery. The walls were chipped, the stairs creaked, and the heater hummed, but it was mine. I thought I'd feel guilty. Instead, I felt steady. I learned that loyalty without respect is just self-destruction. Family can love the version of you that gives endlessly, but they may never love the version that says, "Enough." Leaving didn't make me heartless. It made me whole. Freedom isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the soft click of a door closing behind you, and the quiet promise that your life finally belongs to you. 6 months after I left, my life was almost unrecognizable. The studio apartment above the bakery had become my sanctuary. I'd repainted the peeling walls in soft cream, bought a small bookshelf for the novels I never had time to read, and lined the windowsill with tiny potted plants that reached for the morning sun. Every morning, I brewed coffee in my cheap drip machine and sipped it slowly, savoring the silence that used to feel like loneliness, but now felt like freedom. At work, I poured all the energy I used to waste on family drama into my career. Within 3 months, my manager offered me a lead position in operations, and with it came a significant raise. By the 6th month, I'd been trusted to oversee a major regional account. I bought myself a reliable used car, paid off my lingering credit card debt, and watched my secret savings account grow into a number I never thought I'd see. For the first time in my life, I felt stable. Whole. And then the phone rang. It was a Wednesday night around 11:30 p.m. I almost ignored it. Unknown number. But something in my gut told me who it was. I swiped to answer. "Claire." My sister Lee's voice cracked through the speaker. She sounded nothing like the princess who used to bark orders down the hallway. "Please, don't hang up. We need your help." I stayed silent. "We got evicted," she blurted. "Dad didn't pay the rent. Hey, he said he would, but he didn't. I'm sleeping in the car, Claire. We have nowhere to go. Please, you have money. Just help us this one time." In the background, I heard my father's voice, still full of bluster despite the situation. "Tell her it's her duty. We gave her everything. She can't just abandon us like this." My chest tightened, not with guilt, but with a deep, calm certainty. I finally understood they hadn't changed. Even now, with everything crumbling, they were still entitled to my life as if it belonged to them. I spoke slowly, letting every word land. I did give you everything. My money, my time, my youth. I gave you years I can't get back. And what did you give me in return? Silence, blame, and 100 reasons to leave. Leah sniffled, whispering, "We're your family. You can't do this to us." "No," I said softly. I just finally stopped doing it to myself. I hung up. That night, I sat by my window with the lights off, watching the street lamps flicker on the empty road. I expected to feel cruel. Instead, I felt free. I realized something profound. Sometimes walking away isn't abandonment. It's the first time you choose yourself over people who never would. Success isn't just a paycheck. It's the peace of knowing your life belongs to you. Family can demand guilt and beg, but love without respect is a chain. When I finally broke mine, I discovered that silence can be the sweetest answer. And if someone only calls you when they're drowning, it's not love, they just miss your lifeboat. 3 weeks after that late night call, life was quiet again. I had settled into a rhythm I never thought I'd have. Early mornings, peaceful evenings, and weekends exploring small joys I never knew I'd been missing. I took myself on little dates, farmers markets on Sundays, solo movie nights with takeout, and walks in the park without anyone texting me about bills or chores. Then, one Saturday morning, there was a knock at my apartment door. When I opened it, I froze. My mother, who had left us 12 years ago, stood in the hallway. She looked older, thinner, with streaks of gray in her once black hair. She was holding a cheap leather purse and wearing a coat that wasn't zipped all the way. "Claire," she said softly, almost like she was rehearsing the word. "We need to talk." I didn't move aside. "Why are you here?" She hesitated, eyes darting to the staircase behind her. And that's when I saw them. My father and Leah stood at the bottom, as if they'd been waiting for a cue. My stomach dropped. "You brought them here." Mom's voice trembled. They just need a little help. You've done so well for yourself. They told me how you abandoned them. But I know you're still a good girl deep down. You can save us." I felt heat rise in my chest. Abandon them. That's the story they told her. That I was the villain. Leah took a step forward, her voice sharp. "Stop acting like you're some hero, Claire. You're selfish. You're rich now, and we're suffering. Family doesn't walk away when things get hard." My dad chimed in, louder than ever. "You owe us! After everything we gave you, food, a roof, this is how you repay us. We need 10,000 to get back on our feet. That's nothing to you now." I laughed, a short, cutting laugh that startled even me. $10,000. You think I'm an ATM with a heartbeat. You didn't come here for forgiveness. You came here because you finally ran out of ways to drain me from a distance. Mom flinched, but Dad's face twisted with rage. "We are your family. If you walk away today, you'll regret it. You'll have no one when it matters." Something inside me clicked, like a final lock turning. I walked back inside, grabbed a small cardboard box from my closet, and returned to the doorway. Inside was a stack of unopened letters and cards I'd written to my mother between ages 14 and 18. Birthday wishes, Christmas cards, little updates I hoped she'd care about. I placed the box at her feet. "This is what I gave you," I said, voice steady. "Years of love and loyalty you never earned. You threw it away then, and you're still trying to cash in now." Her eyes filled with tears. My father's fists clenched. Lee just glared. I took a deep breath and said the words that had been sitting in my chest for years. "I don't owe any of you anything. Not anymore. Not ever." Then I closed the door. They knocked for 15 minutes. I didn't answer. The next day, I got a text from an unknown number with just one line. "You'll regret this." But I didn't. In the weeks that followed, I blocked every number, changed my locks, and even got a new phone. My life blossomed in the quiet that followed. I booked my first solo trip to Oregon, a place I'd always wanted to see but never thought I deserved. Standing on a cliff above the ocean months later, wind in my hair, I realized that regret only lives where guilt lives, and I had finally buried mine. betrayal often hides behind the word family. I learned that love without respect is just control in disguise, and some people only miss you when they lose your labor. Choosing yourself isn't cruel. It's the only way to escape a life built on someone else's entitlement. Peace isn't about forgiveness. It's about closing the door and never looking back. I never realized how heavy my old life was until I finally stepped out of it. In the months after shutting the door on my family for the last time, my world became wider in small, almost sacred ways. Mornings started with soft sunlight spilling through my white curtains, not the angry bellow of my father demanding where the envelope of cash was. My apartment above the bakery smelled of warm bread every dawn, and I found comfort in that simple, quiet rhythm. I bought a small desk and turned the corner of my studio into a writing nook. On my days off, I would sit there with lavender tea, journaling about a life I was finally living for me. At work, I flourished. My manager noticed the change almost immediately. How I walked into meetings with my shoulders back, instead of hunched with exhaustion. Within 9 months of leaving home, I was promoted to operations manager, with a salary that the old Claire would have thought belonged to someone else. But success wasn't just about the paycheck. It was about the absence of fear. I didn't dread the knock on my door anymore. I didn't flinch when my phone rang. I was free. Then came the twist I didn't see coming. One evening, while cooking a simple dinner for myself, I got a message on social media from an old neighbor. "Hey Claire, just wanted you to know your dad and Lee were in the news today." I froze, fork in hand. My heart raced as I clicked the link they sent. There it was, a local article with a mugshot that made my stomach twist. My father, charged with credit card fraud. The report said he and Lee had been opening accounts under other people's names, maxing them out for cash advances and online shopping sprees. My chest tightened as I scrawled, reading that they'd been evicted again and had been living in a borrowed car behind a strip mall. The article mentioned a final line that stuck with me. Neighbors reported seeing family members moving bags at night and frequent delivery packages arriving, even after utilities were cut off. It all made sense. When I stopped feeding the cycle, they went hunting for another way to survive, breaking the law, because entitlement doesn't just disappear when you cut it off. I sat back, staring at the screen. I didn't feel joy. I didn't even feel pity. I felt distance. It was as if I was reading about strangers. The next day, my phone buzzed with a new number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Claire." It was Leah, her voice hoarse and small. They're talking about prison. Please, you're the only one who can help. You have money. You have a stable life. Just save us." I stood by my window, watching the sunset paint the street gold. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then, calmly, I did save someone, Leah. I saved myself. And that's the only rescue I'll ever give. I hung up. The final cut of loyalty is the hardest, but sometimes it's the only way to break a lifetime cycle of abuse and manipulation. Family can sink in their own choices, and you can't drown with them just to prove your love. Real love, self-love, means protecting the life you built, even if it means walking away from the people who gave you your last name. A year had passed since the night I left my old life behind. If someone had told me back then that I'd one day wake up to birdsong and warm sunlight instead of shouting and guilt, I would have laughed. But that morning, I sipped coffee by my windowsill, barefoot and wrapped in a soft blanket, and realized I hadn't thought about my father or sister for weeks. Not in anger, not in longing, just not at all. That's how healing feels, I think. Quiet. I had started therapy 3 months prior, after my boss gently suggested I take the company's wellness benefit. At first, I sat on the couch in the small office downtown, arms crossed, half convinced I didn't need it. But the words spilled out anyway. I talked about the nights I cried into my pillow because Lee screamed for new shoes while I was stretching ramen noodles for 2. I talked about how family had been a weapon in my house, not a comfort, how love always came with a bill. My therapist, a calm woman with a soft gray scarf, listened and said one thing that stuck with me. You didn't abandon your family. You stopped abandoning yourself. I carried that sentence like a charm in my pocket. Slowly, I began to let new people in. It started with Maya, a coworker from the logistics department, who invited me to a weekend pottery class. I almost said no. Old habits die hard, but she smiled in a way that made me feel safe. Saturday morning, I found myself with clay under my nails, laughing for the first time in years over a lopsided bowl. We went for coffee afterward, and I caught myself talking freely, without calculating what parts of myself were safe to share. Over the next few months, my circle grew. A retired teacher from my building who traded me fresh bread for helping him set up his email. A local cafe owner who reserved me the corner table when I wanted to write. Even a man named Julian from the pottery class, who had a quiet laugh and asked me to walk the Riverside Trail with him after class one Sunday. They didn't want my money, my time, or my silence. They just wanted me. Then, one evening, my old world tried to claw its way back in. I was at a farmer's market, holding a basket of fresh herbs, when a headline on a nearby newsstand caught my eye. Local man pleads guilty to fraud, faces prison time. There was my father's face. Beneath it, a smaller line. Daughter declined to testify or provide financial support. I froze, the weight of strangers' eyes suddenly on me. That night, my phone buzzed with blocked numbers, voicemails I didn't check. The old Claire would have spiraled into guilt. The new Claire made herself lavender tea, lit a small candle, and turned on a record player I'd found in a thrift store. I sat on the floor, sipping and listening to the soft crackle of vinyl, and I realized something important. The past can knock on my door, but I don't have to open it anymore. Healing doesn't always arrive like a sunrise. Sometimes it tiptoes in quietly, in the form of soft mornings, laughter with new friends, and the absence of fear. I learned that real family can be chosen. And peace is the gift you give yourself when you finally stop living for people who only knew how to take. And maybe the bravest thing I ever did was learn to live without looking back. It was a gray October afternoon when the letter arrived. I found it wedged between a stack of flyers at my apartment door. A formal envelope with my father's name scrawled in sharp, uneven letters. My first instinct was to drop it straight into the trash. But something, curiosity, closure, maybe both, made me open it. Claire, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need to see you one last time before I go away. They're sentencing me next week. Leah will be there. Please come. The address listed was a run-down diner near the edge of town. I stared at the letter for a long time, fingers trembling slightly, before folding it back. My first reaction was no. I owed them nothing. But a small part of me, the part that needed to bury this chapter for good, knew I would go. The diner smelled like grease and old coffee. Rain tapped softly against the window as I slid into the booth across from my father. He looked smaller. Not just physically, though prison had already started to loom over him like a shadow. His eyes were dull, his posture slumped, his confidence hollowed out. Lee sat beside him, arms crossed, mascara smudged, staring at her phone as if it could shield her from reality. For a moment, no one spoke. Then he said, voice cracking, I guess. I thought you'd always be there. I thought family meant you'd keep holding us up. I leaned back, letting the silence stretch. Family isn't about draining one person dry until there's nothing left. Lee finally looked up. Her voice was sharp but shaky. You left us to fall apart. I held her gaze, calm. No, I just stopped holding a house that was already crumbling. My father exhaled, staring at his hands. I lost everything, Claire. I felt no triumph, no anger, just a deep, final clarity. You didn't lose everything. You lost control. And maybe that's the only way you'll ever see the truth. The rain outside grew heavier, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I was on the other side of the glass, watching the storm instead of standing in it. I stood up, placed a $20 bill on the table, not for them, but for the untouched coffee, and said softly, I hope you find something to hold on to that isn't me. Goodbye. I walked out into the rain without looking back. That night, back in my warm apartment, I brewed tea and sat by my window as the city lights blurred through the rain. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. I turned it face down. The final tie had snapped, and for the first time, the quiet in my chest didn't feel like an empty room. It felt like a home I had built for myself. Sometimes closure doesn't come with apologies. It comes when you finally stand in the life you built and realize you no longer need their validation. I learned that walking away isn't the same as hating someone. It's choosing peace over pain, freedom over obligation. And the moment you stop letting guilt drive your choices, you start living a life that truly belongs to you. A full year had passed since that rainy afternoon at the diner. I never heard from my father or Lee again. I didn't block the numbers this time. They just stopped calling. Maybe they finally realized that the version of me who sacrificed everything for them no longer existed. In that year, my world bloomed in ways I never imagined. My apartment above the bakery had become a cozy sanctuary. I painted the walls a soft sage green and hung fairy lights across the window. My little writing nook was now filled with journals, not of pain, but of gratitude. I started hosting Sunday brunches for the friends I had made, Maya, Julian, and the retired teacher from my building. We filled the tiny space with laughter and the smell of fresh coffee and cinnamon rolls. One Sunday morning, as sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor, I realized something simple yet profound. I wasn't surviving anymore. I was living. I had learned to cook meals just for myself, to buy flowers that would bloom only for me, and to sit in silence without feeling lonely. I had built a life that was mine in every sense, earned, chosen, and free of debt to anyone else's expectations. Sometimes I walked by the river in the evenings, watching the water catch the city lights, and whispered to the girl I used to be, "You made it out. You chose you." And that was enough. True freedom comes when you stop waiting for the people who hurt you to change. Healing isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming the life they once convinced you didn't belong to you. And sometimes the bravest thing you'll ever do is close the door. Walk away and never look back. Have you ever reached the point where walking away was the only way to save yourself? Share your story in the comments. I read every single one. New real-life stories are posted every day. Subscribe to Telling Story with me so you never miss a moment that hits home.